the entire instruction. I'm not singling out any part of the instruction.
Sorry.
I think that if there is a question as to the instruction, so I need the other page.
I only wrote that because of one last sentence, which I was about to go through if you wanted.
I don't want anything taken out of context when it's coming from the bench.
This one.
To keep this in context, I will read the instruction to you again. Justifiable use of deadly force. An issue in this case is whether the defendant acted in self-defense. It is a defense to the offense with which George Zimmerman is charged if the death of Trayvon Martin resulted from the justifiable use of deadly force. Deadly force means force likely to cause death or great bodily harm. A person is justified in using deadly force if he reasonably believes that such force is necessary to prevent 1, imminent death or great bodily harm to himself or another, or 2, the imminent commission of aggravated battery against himself or another. Aggravated battery is intentionally touching or striking another against his or her will, and in committing the battery, intentionally or knowingly causing great bodily harm, permanent disability, or permanent disfigurement to the other person. In deciding whether defendant was justified in the use of deadly force, you must judge him by the circumstances by which he was surrounded at the time the force was used. The danger facing the defendant need not have been actual. However, to justify the use of deadly force, the appearance of danger must have been so real that a reasonably cautious and prudent person under the same circumstances would have believed that the danger could be avoided only through the use of that force. Based upon appearances, the defendant must have actually believed that the danger was real. If the defendant was not engaged in an unlawful activity and was attacked at any place where he had a right to be, he had no duty to retreat and had the right to stand his ground and meet force with force, including deadly force, if he reasonably believed that it was necessary to do so to prevent death or great bodily harm to himself or to prevent the commission of a forcible felony. In considering the issue of self-defense, you may take into account the relative physical abilities and capacities of the defendant and Trayvon Martin. If, in your consideration of the issue of self-defense, you have a reasonable doubt on the question of whether the defendant was justified in the use of deadly force, you should find the defendant not guilty. However, if from the evidence you are convinced that the defendant was not justified in the use of deadly force, you should find him guilty if all of the elements of the charge have been proved.
Thank you, Your Honor. You're welcome. Does anyone on the panel have a problem with it being the... Yes, sir.
I heard the phrase forcible felony.
Yes.
I suspect it has some actual definition.
Just so you all know that the court is not going to define other than what's in the instructions. The court will not define any other terminology for you. I understand what we're reading to you may not be something that you can look at and dissect. Please understand that if you are on the jury, a written copy of the instructions the court will read to you will be brought back into the jury room with you so you can read them, discuss them, and amongst yourselves and come up with your own decisions. Does that help? Okay, and you're saying okay. I want to make sure that helps. You're juror G63. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone on the panel have a concern with it being the prosecutor's burden to prove that it was not self-defense? Anyone have a concern with that? Sir, do you have any problem with it being the prosecutor's burden to prove that Mrs. Zimmerman did not act in self-defense?
No, sir, I don't have a problem with
Okay. Anybody, ma'am?
That was juror
B35.
Thank you.
There was some questions raised yesterday about physical disputes, and I know that several of you raised your hands, and I want to talk to you about those. There may be some of those that you would rather have this discussion outside the presence of the rest of the jury. On limited occasions, we can accomplish that, particularly when they're really personal matters, and this may be. So if I come to you, I'm going to ask for a raise of hands. I think I have some notes, but I'm going to see if we can talk about some of it in the whole group, because I think that we may need to. So with that, sir, I think that yesterday you had said that you were involved in a physical altercation back when you were younger. Is that right? Okay. Was that, I think you said it was in middle school?
B7, yes, it was.
Thank you. Tell me a little bit about that, a little bit about that experience.
Let's see, it was 6th grade. Wow. I'd like to think that I got in a fight with a bully, but it might have been possible that I was the bully.
Okay. That common sense at 5 and common sense at 65 thing?
Not
Okay.
65.
I didn't say you were yet. I didn't say you were yet. And you weren't 5 in 7th grade either. Just throwing out the concept. Let me ask you this. Did you get hit in the face?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. It obviously stuck with you long enough to mention it yesterday.
So it's the only fight I've ever been in my life.
Okay.
So I remember it.
If there is evidence of a physical confrontation here in this case, would your experience back then sort of drip over onto what happened here?
No, I barely remember it.
When the event happened, have any problems with memory of it back then? Any problems remembering what happened even back when it happened?
Oh, no, I remember when it happened. It's just, as you get older, memories fade.
And then I think going down the road, I think you had said that you'd been involved in, I think your words, I think it was only a couple of fights when you were younger?
Yes, when I was younger, and one just a few years ago trying to collect rent in one of my properties.
Okay.
I got attacked by one of the guy. I'm sorry, B35. Okay, I'm sorry, yeah. I was trying to collect some rent a few years ago, and the young lady moved some guy into the house, and it wasn't in the lease, and I was talking about it, and he hit me. And so we tussled, and I had to beat him down, and he ran and grabbed a butcher knife, and I ran in my car and grabbed a bat, and we stalemated. And he went back in the house, and I just sat in front of the house and called the cops.
Okay. Did he sucker punch you?
Yes.
Didn't know it was coming?
No, I didn't know it was coming.
Where did he hit you?
Right there.
Caused bleeding?
No, I think he was kind of stunned that it didn't affect me because I looked in his eyes and saw him looked after he hit me, and I just grunted a little and looked back at him and started firing back on him.
Okay. Again, if there's a physical confrontation discussed in this case, would your experience with that, and we'll talk about some others in a minute, would your experience with that affect your ability to just look at the facts of this case and apply the law to this case?
No, not really, because that was my own personal experience. It has nothing to do with this.
Okay.
No, with-
Okay. A couple of the other fights you were in, I guess when you were younger, were they sort of similar?
Yeah, some were similar, some were actually a little bit worse, but pretty much along the same
Okay.
area.
When you say worse, just worse result for you, or?
Yeah, I got beat down, and I won a few, lost a few, but it is what it is.
Okay. Tell me the common experience of being in those fights. What was going on with you and your body?
Well, it's like you don't really realize what's going on. I know I didn't. Some didn't realize what's going on. Just basically thinking about myself and not feeling what was coming on me, and just wanted to get out of it and make sure I was all right when I get out of it. So I would do what I had to do to try to get out of it and make sure I was all right. That was basically the adrenaline rush going, and I didn't feel anything until after it was over.
I know that there were some other people who had some events, so sort of going down the first row, ma'am, did you mention that you were involved in a domestic violence event?
Yes.
Okay. And again, these are very personal areas. I don't want to delve too first into it, so let me try it this way. We've heard these two jurors discuss sort of how they reacted to the event of violence in their lives. Did you have a similar reaction or experience to it?
Well, one thing you mentioned about losing memory of, I did lose bits and pieces for a little while, and then things came back to me.
Okay. Did that come back over time?
E6.
Did that come back over time?
E6. Yes, I'm E6.
Yes, you're E6. I do remember that.
Yes, it came back to me later.
Okay. Anything else that was either similar to what either of these gentlemen said about the experience of being involved in a violent act?
Well, it's just a completely different situation, and it really doesn't seem relevant to me at all. I mean, it wouldn't even,
Okay.
and yeah, I wouldn't have any way to compare it.
Okay. And I appreciate your willingness to talk about it here. I know that bringing up any bad experience, particularly a violent one, but I appreciate that. My understanding is, I think, ma'am, that you also had an event that may have even been closer or more specific. Is that accurate?
It is.
And your number?
E73. My nephew was shot and killed.
Okay. How long ago was that?
13 years.
Was it, I'm going to say it as though, was it an event where the police got involved in the course of the shooting?
I'm not sure I understand why you're asking.
Well, I guess, those true accidental shootings that might happen, and there are those...
It's a
where-
home invasion. He was shot through the door. He was an innocent person sitting at a table.
Okay. So, in effect, completely random. And they came to his house rather than some other.
That part I don't know.
Obviously, we're talking here about a case where somebody was shot. Circumstances much different than that, but do you think that memory of your nephew's passing from 13 years ago would make it such that you would not be able to set that aside and decide just on the facts that you hear today?
I would hope so.
Well, let's talk about that a bit more. We talked about pretrial publicity, for example, which is nowhere near the level of emotional attachment that a family member's passing is. So, pretrial publicity, we said you can hear it, you don't know if it's accurate, you don't know if it applies to this case, you have to exclude it. And I think you said that you could, right? And we've talked about the standard that we have here, the state's burden, and that the evidence has to come from that witness box right behind you or physical evidence that you see, and that you have to decide only on that, and that you have to apply the law to that evidence, right? So, can you do that? Granted, you have a life experience, like a traumatic life experience, that is somewhat similar, but can you set aside or just make that life experience part of your growth and common sense that we ask you to bring with us, but not focus on your nephew's passing as being an overriding influence on what happens here?
I'd say I'd hope to, but you know that it's always there.
Sure.
An unarmed young man is shot
Right.
and killed.
Okay, and I appreciate your willingness to share here as well. There were, I thought, at least one other person who had a violent experience in their past. Did I not have that right? Somebody said yesterday? Oh, did I pass over you? I'm sorry.
86.
And again, this is something where, if need be, we can talk about it, but I just want to make sure that we talk about that experience so it doesn't do what, this juror was talking about. It may have some impact. So tell me about that.
I worked at a fast food restaurant where somebody came in and robbed us at gunpoint.
Okay. Twice, right?
Twice. I was there for both times.
Okay. Would that impact your ability to sit here? I think you said it would not,
No.
all right? Any concern with being able to set that aside?
No.
Okay. And then ma'am right behind her?
K95. I don't really know if it's relevant, but I had an old boyfriend who broke into my apartment, and so I...
Okay. Sure. Were you home?
Yes,
Okay. Was there violence on you?
yes,
Okay.
and on him.
Okay. I don't want to make light of it, but,
They did call police, but yes.
okay. You heard the woman in front of you, E6, talk about in a moment of that type of event, the sort of a memory loss or not remembering everything. Did you experience any of that?
No, sir.
Remembered it? Okay. And this juror here, 35?
Yes, 35.
My first one. He had said that in a couple of the altercations that he had, your focus comes in. Is that sort of right on just
Yeah,
what's going on?
Pretty much, you're just in the flow. You don't really think about, a lot of times I didn't think about what's going on, but just trying to get out of it.
Okay. Did you have any experience like that?
Yes, I did. K95, I had the fright flight where I just went out and I kicked his motorcycle over and locked him out of my house, and the police came.
Okay. Kicking a motorcycle is not easy.
You just get strength that you don't know where it comes from.
Okay. And that was based upon the threat to you?
Yes.
Also, there was some conversations yesterday about fitness and people who involve themselves in fitness. And I do remember, sir, in the back, your number? Yes. That you had involved yourself sort of ongoingly in a lot of weightlifting, tennis, and swimming? Yeah. Okay. His number is H18. Sure. I'm going to try something that may not work out, but the gentleman to your right there, your number?
B72.
B72. You may have heard that he does a lot of arm wrestling. I'm going to continue both athletes, just because, well, honestly, of the way you look, and also what you've told me about what you involve yourself in. Can you pick out an athlete in a room, you think?
I could tell who does
Okay.
take care of themselves. Yeah.
What do you think? Can you look around, sort of pick out the athletes?
I disagree with that. I've seen some people who look like they're not strong at all do the most incredible things. My one friend in particular, skinny guy, you never think he have it in him. And he's just a beast, so I don't go around and say, yeah, who give me a run for my money, or I can take him.
Okay.
I think it's bad to do that, especially before a match or anything like that.
Sounds good. Who's played football? You played football? You played football? And you played football? Okay. What position?
I was all the way around.
I'm sorry, your number again.
I'm sorry, age 29. Fullback, split end, defense, offense.
You learned how to give a hit?
Absolutely,
You learned how to take one?
absolutely.
What about you in the back? What football did you play? Right there, yeah, with the gray. Yes, sir. Your number?
No.
That's you.
B72,
Yes.
ditto. I did just about, you've got some hits, you take some hits, more offensive than anything.
Okay. All right, sir, up front, you play some football?
Yes, B7 in school.
Okay. What positions?
I was always slower, so I'd be up in front, along the line.
Okay. Again, learn how to give some hits and take some hits?
No, it's flag football.
Oh, flag football? Okay. There were,
You specify when you ask.
no. Football is football. With a physique like this, I played flag football too. So I know where you're coming from. There were some conversations about neighborhood watch, and there was a hands raised about those people who live in communities with neighborhood watch. Would you raise them again? Okay. Those and everybody else, neighborhood watch, good thing or bad thing? Good thing or bad? Good. Everyone says it's good. Who thinks it's a bad thing? Okay.
E40, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying it needs to have the parameters defined of what their purpose is, as what their goal is, and just sort of what assumptions they're going to work under, then to know if it's too much or not enough, or if it's serving the needs of that community in which they are doing the watch for.
Sure. What do you think the general purpose of neighborhood watch is?
I would believe it is to keep your eye out, to be alert, to be attentive to things that are maybe different. If, cars are parked maybe too long, or people who might be in that area that maybe don't belong there are trespassing, or maybe are soliciting, and you're not supposed to be doing that. So it's a balance of what the rules are versus maybe having a way to keep your eye out to see if those rules are being met or not.
A watchful eye to see if something is amiss?
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone disagree with that? Yes, sir, ma'am.
I don't totally disagree. I-24. It can be a good thing if the entire community is involved in it. It can be a very bad thing if they're not. When you have one or two people who are very diligent in making sure that their neighbors are safe, there's an imbalance there.
I'm not sure I follow you. I understand what you're saying about an imbalance, because does that mean that just 2 or 3 people are taking on all the workload? Or,
sometimes.
Okay. So you feel it needs to be more?
Everybody needs to get involved. Everybody needs to be involved in assisting it.
Okay.
We had, in my neighborhood, where a house was empty, it was broken into, and there were like copper wiring taken and other things like that. And I did see a truck in another house that was empty, and they were taking things out of the house, and I took a couple of pictures of the truck. But, people thought I was being silly.
Okay, is that sort of the concept of one watching out for the whole? And then the whole watching out for the one?
Yeah.
Do you think that's a good idea to have in a community?
No. I think everybody needs to be involved. Everybody needs to understand that it's very important to watch out for each other, to make the community safe.
Anyone disagree with that? Yes.
I agree to a certain point, but I think yesterday there were quite a few that mentioned that, yeah, we have a sign, but I don't know if there's actually people that are there. And I think, if nothing else, at least as a deterrent to criminals, because I think criminals go out and they choose who are your easy targets. So there might be one neighborhood next to another, one with the Crime Watch sign, and they're not living there, they don't know how active they are, versus one that doesn't have the sign. That could be a deterrent. So I don't know the level of involvement that really even took. And I know that's not going to deter all criminals, but those are my thoughts.
But
for B61?
B61, I apologize.
as a concept, does anyone disagree with the idea of having neighbors watch out for neighbors? Okay. For those people who are in gated communities, one more raise of the hands just so I can pick on someone. Great. Do the police patrol gated communities less because they're gated? Is that your experience, ma'am?
Sorry, me?
I thought it was you with the blue. Did you say that you were in a gated community?
It's
Yeah.
an apartment complex, the gate is always open, so
Okay.
I don't know if that's...
Sir, how about you?
H81.
our community is actually manned part-time by deputy sheriffs. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
not a fair, probably not a fair
Agreed.
example.
All right, then you get off the hook. Somebody else in a gated community? Yes, ma'am?
I don't really know if they could, I know
Not a fair
Agreed.
example.
All right, then you get off the hook. Somebody else in a gated community? Yes, ma'am?
I don't really know if they could, I know I have a cop who lives in my gated community, and there's a lot of people who park wrong that irritate me, and they haven't had anything done to it, so I'm going to assume no in my neighborhood.
That's your I-19.
And there was, I'm going to now start doing the bouncing around a little bit, but what that indicates to you is that I'm getting very close to being done. So at least we'll get you out to lunch here pretty quickly. And I'm at the edge of the time that I said it would take me as well. So we're going to get close to the end here in a few minutes. We did have some conversations earlier about firearms, and I want to talk about that for just a minute. I think that one of the people said yesterday that there is a responsibility that comes with a firearms. Does anyone, again, it sounds overly simplistic, does anyone disagree that if you're going to have a firearm that you should use it responsibly? Okay. And so I think you mentioned that you have a concealed weapons permit, right? Does anyone think that those who have a concealed weapons permit should not? Raise your hand. Should we, those who have a concealed weapons permit, just shouldn't? We don't need people carrying guns. Sir?
A7.
Okay.
I'm really concerned about the proliferation of handguns, knowing throughout our country and the number of shootings involving them.
Okay.
I'm not comfortable with the sort of wild, wild west attitude.
Okay.
I don't want to live somewhere where people are just walking around and carrying guns. I don't feel comfortable around them.
Talk to him.
Well, I know he doesn't have one right now. But if he did, I would be very nervous. And I will admit, even with the utmost training through this jury selection process, I've been surrounded by armed deputies. And
that concerns you?
And even that gave me creeps.
Okay. Firearm. Does it bother you that I have it?
How's
Not
that
with a
a
firearm, but we're going to make believe, because if I had one, he'd have me in cuffs.
Okay.
Firearm.
So you're pretending that's a firearm. Okay.
You worried?
Yeah.
Okay. Who's worried? I have a firearm in my hand. It's really okay to be worried if I have a firearm in my hand. If you are, don't make it up for the story, but if you are, people having firearms, who troubles you? Here. How about now? It's in my pocket, but you know it's there. Who's concerned? Why?
Okay, I don't know you.
Okay.
I don't know how responsible you are with that.
Correct. What if I was able to show you, with this help, a concealed weapons permit? Let's make believe my car that gets me in the Orange County Courthouse is a concealed weapons permit. It's not, but let's make believe it is. So you know I have this.
Okay.
Still concerned?
By the way, I'm E54, I'm sorry. I feel a little better.
A little bit better?
But,
Okay.
But I still don't know you. I still don't know
Right.
how responsible you are, even with that card in your pocket.
Right, okay, legitimate. Who else has concerns? This is a firearm, it's in my pocket. Ma'am?
E40. I guess I'm neutral on it. I don't know enough about concealed weapons and getting a permit for it, so I don't know the validity, credibility of all that piece.
Okay.
But as he had said, I don't know you, I don't know your intentions, I don't know why you have a firearm or wanted one, and I know I don't, so I think that makes me, again, like, B7 said, just a little bit less easy.
Okay. You've had firearms, right? Didn't you have a concealed weapons permit?
I did.
That expired?
I did.
So if I handed you my loaded gun and asked you to unload it for me, would that be okay? Can you do it?
Well, not in this situation, I could do it.
Okay.
B35. I'm sorry.
Okay. Who else has concerns? Ma'am?
I'm sorry, that was B37.
37.
22.
Yes.
I would be concerned because even though you have a permit for it, it tells me that the state knows you have it or some governmental entity knows you have it, but it doesn't tell me what you might do with it. So if we're in a room together and you see something and you draw your weapon, that would make me nervous.
I still have to act responsibly with it, right? And you don't know if I'm going to or not. Is that the concern of most people?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yes, ma'am.
My concern is, you have a permit to carry a concealed weapon, which means, I-24, which means, you're taking responsibility and saying, I want to carry a gun, telling the law that you carry a gun.
Yes.
Okay? So there's nothing you're trying to hide. What about the people, and there's a lot of them, that are running around without a concealed permit? Those are the people I'm concerned about. Those are the people that are trying to hide something. And that's where my concern is.
Sure. And that's crime, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you don't know which are which yet, right? And that's the concern that you have?
My concern is that there are too many people that carry a gun that don't have a permit.
Here's the point that I want to see if you could.
How do we?
Sure.
How do we stop that? We don't. We can't.
If in fact there is evidence of the carrying of a firearm concealed with a permit, with that fact alone, the fact that we're talking about a firearm, I'm going to put mine down so we don't have to worry about it. So if evidence comes out that there is a firearm being carried concealed with a concealed weapons permit, will that fact alone cause you such concern that it would infect or impact on how you would handle this case? Nobody? Nobody at all is that worried about guns? Yes?
The only concern I would have is if I observed them not being responsible with it in my presence. But other than that, they've done what they were supposed to do legally. Okay.
The real question is, in the facts of this case, not that there's going to be a gun in this courtroom, but in the facts of this case, if you were to look at the facts with the issue or the fact that someone had a concealed weapons permit and carried a gun, be a concern of yours, such that it would override, let me just finish the question if I might, that it would override your ability to be fair and impartial.
What is the objection? Objection is to getting into the facts and getting your commitment from the jury's
Sustained.
We had talked a little while ago about witnesses and law enforcement officers, and I think Mr. DeLeon said, whether you're unemployed or a law enforcement officer, will you treat that witness's testimony the same? And I think everybody said, of course. I'm going to ask you to modify that to the extent that you agree that what I read earlier about potential bias or ability to understand or ability to see what they testify to. Would you agree that those are considerations you would have on who to give credibility to or weight to their testimony? Did I say that in as confusing a way as possible? Yes. Okay, great. I'm going to try it one more time. When Mr. DeLeon said you should just look at a witness, whether they're unemployed or a law enforcement officer, and give them equal weight. And you said we should, right? And we will, correct? Yes.
You really can't unless, if they're like an expert.
Okay.
They would have a little bit more credibility than just the average Joe that went out and gave testimony.
Okay. Let me ask it this way. Will you all agree, I'll ask it this way. Will you all agree to assess the the weight that you give a witness's testimony on those factors we talked about, which is opportunity to see it, maybe their bias in what they do. Any concern with that? Yes.
B7, I have just a question. Law enforcement officers consider expert witnesses?
No. I can't tell you much about that, but unless they are presented as an expert within the field of law enforcement, and the judge says, listen to them, they're an expert, no. Law enforcement officers, when they come in to testify and said, I did this, they're just fact witnesses, what we call fact witnesses. Yes, ma'am.
Page 69. I think it works a little bit backwards in how you're saying it. First, I have to listen to the witness testimony, figure out if there's bias and how it falls within the timeline of what everyone else is saying. If they're saying something radical than what everyone else is saying, then I might not weigh it the same as everyone else. So it kind of works a little bit backwards. So I understand where you're getting to, where people have bias and we have to weigh the information we get in different orders or different weights. But I think it works a little bit backwards than how you were saying it.
Okay. It won't be the last time I'm being confusing during the trial, so I'll try not to be, but certainly you'll take all the witnesses' testimonies in context to everybody else's. Is that what we're talking about?
No, about your previous question.
I want to forget that one. It obviously wasn't working. But we'll take you agree to take all witnesses' testimony in context with the other witnesses that you hear? Any concern with that?
No.
Okay. And of course, with the evidence as well. Okay. There was a question by the prosecution yesterday about whether or not a 17-year-old's life is worth less than somebody else's. And you all answered no, of course. And then we talked about black lives, I think, as well, worth less than whites or something. Does anyone have any residual concerns that any of the external pressures that may exist in this case would be able to affect your ability to sit as jurors? Anybody? Because this is truly, I'm near the end, and this is the last chance that we're going to have to find out what you're going to bring back to the jury box with you. So any concerns at all about that? Do you think the corollary that because it was a 17-year-old's life that was lost, that should be given special consideration over and above what you would give if he had turned 18, or if he was 28, or even if he was 78? Any thought about that life, having been lost, should be given any special consideration because he was 17? So what do you think about that?
No, I think everybody's equal in the law, so no, I don't think anybody should have any preference.
Okay.
That's true.
Sorry, E54, yes.
And that similar, it was a black life that was lost rather than any other race. Any special consideration that should be given to that?
No.
Anybody?
No.
Okay. I said it was unique earlier because I think it is. I like it on this side of the world. That side, it's a little unique. And part of it is that we as human beings constantly make immediate decisions and assumptions. We talked about that earlier. In this unique set of circumstances, you are told affirmatively not to do that. So I'd like to have one person tell me that it's going to be difficult for them to wait until the very end of this case before they start getting a feel for what they think should happen in it. Somebody acknowledge that it's going to be tough to wait until the end, that you're going to go through the first day of testimony and keep your mind open, that you're going to go through the second day, maybe the second week of testimony, and intentionally and affirmatively keep your mind open to wait. Since you're looking down, I'm going to ask you, ma'am, if you would tell me your number.
E28, I think as human beings, it will be difficult for everybody not to probably have some form of opinion, but that doesn't necessarily mean they can't, look at all the facts and come up with what is right.
Anybody else have concerns with being able to wait until the end? Yes, ma'am.
B12. I don't know if it's like concerns, but I think as we will be weighing the evidence daily as we're getting it, and I don't know if we'll be forming an opinion, we'll wait to the end to give our full opinion, but I know we're going to be taking the evidence in and going, okay, and then if it's not going with the evidence we got the day before, you'll kind of be thinking in your head. Yeah.
We're not going to ask you to be robots. We talked about that earlier. My only concern is that, well, first of all, you know, of course, that you cannot discuss it with the other jurors until we're done. I mean, that's easy. You can't say that two people on the jury, well, what do you think about witness A? That's easy, and the judge will instruct you to that. The concern is you want to make sure that even in your own mind, you listen to witness A and go, oh, okay, I got it. Witness A pretty much cleared it up, and there's witness, W yet to come. Make sure that you withhold making that decision, because my concern when you make that decision, it's harder to get away from. It's that assumption. It's that people are going to drive down the street and stay in their lane, that you sort of miss the constancy of watching what's going on around you, right? Can you agree to that?
I can agree to that, yes.
Can everyone agree to two things? One, that it's going to be hard to do, yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah? And then two, will you still do it?
Before you get into another topic, and
This is in no way to restrict you from going on further, but it's now 12:42. That's the time that we broke for lunch yesterday, and I have 40 people sitting here who have not had anything to eat since 9 o'clock, and I can hear some stomachs rumbling.
I'm going to get them to lunch with my last words within a minute.
I don't want to restrict you. You can have time after lunch.
I said earlier that I was about done, and I'm going to be about done.
Okay.
So truly about done. It's easy for you to get to this question, but I always say it first. Can you assure, of course, that you'll give the state attorney's office in their prosecution a fair trial? Okay. If in doing so, that is an acquittal, if we tell the state attorney's office that they simply have not carried their burden of convincing you beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt, can you also say that to the Martin family? Because by your verdict you would be. Concerns with being able to say that? Yes.
I feel a little bad about the loss of their son and everything, but that's what I believe, that he was not guilty of murder. That's what I have to state, but I still feel bad for the family's loss.
Okay. And can you give George Zimmerman, the focus of today's trial, can you give him a fair trial? Can you tell the state that they will only get their conviction if and when they convince you beyond a reasonable doubt?
Yes.
Nothing further on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to send you to lunch. Again, I'm going to give you my instructions. When you go to lunch, you're not to talk about the case amongst yourselves nor with anybody else. You're not to read or listen to any radio, television, or newspaper reports about the case. You're not to get on the internet by using any type of electronic device to do independent research about the case, people, places, things, terminology. And you're not to read or create any emails, text messages, Twitters, tweets, blogs, or posts, or social posts about the case. Do I have your assurances, each and every one of you, that you will abide by these instructions? Yes. And raise your hand if you cannot abide by that instruction. No hands are being raised. We're going to have to do some work without you, so I'm going to give you an extra long lunch hour so we can eat some lunch, come back, do a little bit of work before we bring you back. So if I gave you an hour and a half, it's 12:45, so 1:15. If you all will be back here, start gathering about That's 30 minutes. I can't talk.
We are paying attention.
2:15. Or start coming back between 2 and 2:15 so we can get you back in the rooms and we can proceed. It followed Deputy Jarvis outside of the courtroom. Please be seated. We have the Fry hearing coming up at 2 o'clock. I do not want to keep these jurors back here all that time, so I know that you all need to discuss amongst each side about how you want to proceed with the jury selection process as far as doing your strikes. So would you be able to have lunch in a half hour's time and be back here and get that discussed? Well, Mr. West, we were going to have the Fry hearing yesterday, and you requested that the Fry hearing be held off till today. And I don't know that the witnesses available is beyond 2 o'clock. And I would like to complete that Fry hearing so the court can issue a ruling, and I can't do so until we finish with the testimony. So I've got to have some take from you all as far as time also to get all of this accomplished. So you tell me how much time you think you're going to need for us to reconvene here and go over the jury selection process, or finish the jury selection process. All the questioning has been done. It's just the preemptory strikes or any strikes for cause that needs to be completed.
Your Honor, since the court asked, I would suggest an hour and 15 minutes so that we can have something to eat and that we can also discuss among ourselves how we want to proceed.
Okay, court is in recess till 2 p.m. That gives you the hour and 15 minutes. Go ahead, get something to eat, have your discussions, and be back ready to discuss challenges to the jurors. Thank you all. Have a good lunch.